How Australia's tax system went off the rails. A nation built on land and a tax system that got it all wrong. When the first fleet landed in 1788, Australia became a land of opportunity, but only for those who controlled the land. From the very beginning, our country's economy was built around who owned the land, who didn't, and who made money from it. Fast forward to today, and land ownership is still the defining factor of who gets rich and who struggles. But instead of fixing this imbalance, our tax system has made it worse. We punish workers with income tax, we gouge buyers with stamp duty, we tax businesses on their profits, but we barely tax the one thing that makes people truly wealthy: land. It wasn't always this way. Australia once led the world in land taxation. Inspired by American economist Henry George, land value taxes were introduced to stop speculation, break up land monopolies, ensure everyone benefited from economic growth. But over time, vested interests won out. Land taxes were watered down, new inefficient taxes were introduced, and the dream of a fair taxation system was buried. This is the story of how Australia's tax system went off the rails, and how we can fix it by reviving the very idea we abandoned over a century ago. How land shaped Australia's economy. The colonial land grab. In the early 1800s, land in Australia was given away for free or sold at an absurdly low price. Instead of being distributed fairly, huge portions of land ended up in the hands of a small group of wealthy landowners who built massive estates, while the working class struggled to own even a small piece of land. As cities like Sydney and Melbourne grew, land speculation became a national sport. Wealthy landowners sat on vast amounts of empty land, knowing that as more people arrived and businesses grew, the values of their holdings would skyrocket, all without them lifting a finger. The government needed money to fund infrastructure, roads, schools, hospitals, but instead of taxing landowners, they relied on customs duties and indirect taxes on goods and services, which hit the working class the hardest. It was a broken system that benefited a few at the expense of the many. But then an idea arrived that threatened to change everything. The Henry George Revolution, the tax that could have changed Australia. Who was Henry George? In 1879, American economist Henry George published Progress and Poverty, a book that shook the economic world. His argument was simple but radical. Land should belong to everyone, not just a handful of owners. Since landowners don't create the value of land, the community does. They should pay a tax on land value to fund public goods. This tax, a land value tax, or LVT, should replace all other taxes, meaning no income tax, no GST, and no payroll tax. George's ideas spread like wildfire, and nowhere were they more popular than in Australia. Australia's early land value tax experiments. By the late 1800s, Australia was leading the world in land tax reform, inspired by George. Political movements pushed for a tax on unimproved land value to break up large estates and stop speculation. South Australia introduced a land tax in 1884. Victoria and New South Wales followed in the 1890s. The federal government introduced a national land tax in 1910, targeting wealthy landowners who were sitting on massive amounts of land without using it productively. These land taxes forced landowners to develop or sell their land, stopping them from hoarding land just to watch it appreciate. It worked. Land became more available, speculation was reduced, and tax revenues were used to fund public goods. For a brief moment, Australia was on track to having the fairest tax system in the world. How the land tax was slowly killed. The land elite fights back. Of course, the rich landowners hated the land tax. They weren't about to give up their golden goose without a fight. Over time, they lobbied politicians to weaken the tax, lowering rates, increasing exemptions, and eventually getting rid of the national land tax altogether in 1952. The state-based land taxes that remained were also slowly eroded, with loopholes, exemptions, and political deals ensuring that big landowners barely paid anything, while workers and businesses carried the tax burden. New taxes replaced the old, and everything gets worse. As the land tax faded, governments needed new ways to raise money, but instead of taxing land, the one thing that people don't create, they started taxing income, spending, and businesses instead. Income tax, introduced in the early 1900s, punishes work instead of wealth. Capital gain tax in 1985, supposed to tax land profits, but loopholes mean investors barely pay it. Stamp duty discourages home buying and mobility, making the housing market worse. GST in 2000 hurts low-income Australians the most, while landowners pay nothing. We went from a smart, efficient tax system that encouraged productivity and economic growth to one that punishes workers and rewards speculation. What could have been and what we can do now if we kept the land value tax. Imagine if Australia stuck with the original plan. Housing wouldn't be unaffordable, speculation would have been curbed decades ago, stopping the runaway house price inflation we see today. Workers wouldn't be overtaxed. Instead of punishing people for working, we would have taxed unearned land wealth instead. The economy would be stronger, businesses wouldn't be crushed by taxes, and people would have more disposable income to spend and invest. How can we fix it now? It's not too late to fix our broken system. We just have to go back to the idea that worked in the first place. Number one, replace stamp duty with a land value tax. This encourages property transactions, stops hoarding. Number two, reduced income tax. Make work pay again by shifting the burden off wages and onto landowners. Number three, tax land, not business. Stop punishing productive activity and start taxing wealth that people don't earn. Number four, end speculation. An LVT would force investors to actually use land or sell it, creating more supply and lowering house prices. A new future for Australia. Australia's tax system didn't break overnight. It was designed the wealthy for the wealthy, to shift taxes away from landowners and onto workers and consumers. But we don't have to accept this. We can fix it by reviving Henry George's vision of a fair, efficient land tax. We can end speculation, lower house prices, cut taxes for workers, and create a stronger economy for everyone. The only question is, how long are we willing to let the rich get richer while the rest of Australia suffers? The answer starts with demanding a better tax system, one that puts land back where it belongs, in service of the people, not the privileged few.